Welcome to Retail Intelligence in Action, a limited video podcast series from Ometria and OFFBounds, where we cut through the hype and talk honestly about how AI is reshaping enterprise retail marketing. I'm your host, Ron Thurston, and in every episode, I'm joined by one of the founders of Ometria, either Jalal Laguiev or Ivan Mazour, as we explore what's real, what's next, and what it means for leaders building the future of this industry. In this episode, we're exploring one of the most pressing questions in retail marketing today. What does it really mean to lead with trust and authenticity in the age of AI? Our guest is Julie Channing, a brand builder with more than 25 years of experience scaling some of the most influential consumer companies of our time. She was the first employee and founding marketer at Allbirds, where she helped architect the brand from day one and played a key role in building it into a global leader in sustainable fashion. Julie's also held senior roles at Google's Nest, Levi's, and the renowned creative agency Aqua, where she helped define what modern marketing could look like in a digital-first world. Today, she works as a fractional CMO and advisor, bringing unmatched clarity, integrity, and creativity to the way brands show up and scale. Our conversation explores brand trust, AI ethics, consumer transparency, and how to craft marketing that remains deeply human, even as the tools become increasingly automated. So let's dive in. Julie, Ivan, it's really nice to have you both here. Thank you. So good to see you too. I'm excited about this conversation. We did a great intro of your background, Julie, just to learn a little bit more about your exceptional history and your value that you've added to this industry. So I'm really happy that you're here.
Oh, thank you.
Of course.
I'm so happy to be here as well.
Great. So take us through, we want to kind of start maybe with brand fundamentals. And where do brands sit today when it think about the basics of marketing? And then we're going to move into more technology and future thinking, but what are the fundamentals brands need to have today?
I think today, especially in this era of AI, it's really, really important that brands get back to a state of authenticity. And by that, I mean brands being really consistent in what they say and stand for and how they're bringing that to life in virtually every touch point they have with their consumers. And then is that what a consumer would say back that the brand represents in their hearts and minds? And that authenticity is what's really starting to separate brands who are thriving in the era of AI versus those who are getting lost in the noise.
And do you have an example of one today that you think is really hitting the mark in authenticity?
I do, actually. A pretty recent example and one that I'm just loving is the recent Gap denim campaign. Yeah. I actually worked on Gap many years ago, earlier in my career. So I know quite a bit about that brand's history and their DNA. They've had some rises and falls, but this most recent denim campaign, I think, sits on a shelf of excellence in terms of not only getting back to a place of authenticity and what does that mean and how do you do that, but also how do you do that in today's world with this new generation of consumers. So I'm happy to touch a little bit on what about that campaign really struck a chord with me.
Please do. No, I'd be curious your thoughts. It's been written about extensively, commented about, because there were multiple denim campaigns for the summer. We don't have to go into them, but that one really seemed to stand out.
Yeah, so I worked at Levi's at one point in my career as well. And so I know September is denim month, and really those categories follow trends. They follow fashion trends. So from a product distinction standpoint, from one brand to the next, there's not that much distinction in the styles of the season. Yeah. The distinction comes through in the storytelling and how much that feels ownable to the brand and what people believe they stand for and are associated with. And so in the case of Gap, they have a long lineage of being a brand who really was synonymous with incredible music, marketing campaigns that were about celebrating dance and movement and cultural connection. And they lost their way a little bit for some period of time. And I think this is the first time that they've come back, not only, again, getting back to that authenticity of what people know and love them for, but making it relevant in today's world, not only just with this new generation of consumers that I call, the TikTok generation, who obsess over learning dance moves and sharing their unique take on, which is exactly what they did in this campaign. They partnered with Cat's Eye. The choreography was so amazing and unique, and that really drove the fandom. But this is a brand who understood what makes them authentic, and they married that with the power of AI to amplify their authenticity. They made it really easy for people to become a part of the campaign in a whole host of ways, and I think that's why, of all the denim brands that were out in the market in that time frame, they're the clear winners.
Yeah. And there's a resurgence of that kind of mall-based 80s, 90s, Abercrombie, PacSun. All of a sudden, there is this kind of trend toward these brands doing it really well.
Yeah, and they're tapping back into what made them so unique and special in the first place, but also not being afraid to evolve with the times. And I think, there were some brands who maybe got some criticism for the authenticity and people questioning, well, what do you stand for? I'm not really clear. But Gap did not fall into those traps. In fact, I think that it's propelled their brand into the center of culture in a way that it hasn't been in a really long time.
Very interesting. Thank you. Ivan, any thoughts on that?
It's fascinating. I'm sure we'll touch on that later as we start talking about AI, but I think the relevance and importance of authenticity, in particular human authenticity, is going to become so vital in the coming years, even more vital than it's ever been before. Obviously, to build any kind of retail brand, being authentic has always been key to success, has been key to marketing and marketing to be effective. But I think we've never really operated in a world where the majority of things stopped being human, and we are about to enter that kind of world. And therefore, we're going to really cling to anything which is truly, authentically human. And as I sort of hear you talk about the campaign, that's what kind of comes across. It feels like they've really managed to get that right.
Yeah. Yep. Authenticity breeds trust, and trust breeds loyalty.
And how do you then identify, when you said that, Ivan, around it will be hard to differentiate what is human and what is not? How do you believe the consumer is doing that today, or are they?
So I think it's less about differentiating. I think it's just what we're seeing already, and what we will see a huge amount of in the coming years is things that we used to experience in a human way being kind of turned into things that are a little bit more automated. And obviously things like work, we've been doing kind of automation, and workflows are becoming more and more kind of software driven, now AI driven. But I think the human world, the kind of consumer world, our day-to-day life hasn't yet gone down that journey and is just about to be. If you look at the pace at which humanoid robots are accelerating, for example, it is somewhere between 2 and 7 years until we have human-like in-home robots being able to do things like groceries and cleaning. It's not an unreasonable, if you look at all the companies that are building them, that's not an unreasonable timeline. So just the fact that our world is becoming kind of overtaken by technology, I think it'll be very obvious that those bits will be technological, and we will search for every single possible moment that we can, whether that's time with our families or our friends, or going and joining a physical book club where you can read a physical book rather than kind of a Kindle and kind of having a conversation. And very, very much the physical retail experience and the interactions that we have with the brands that might have shaped our childhoods are going to be places where we search out for that human experience. So I think that's what
And on the theme of fundamentals, you're one of the, I would say, experts when it comes to data and like clean data, the idea of like you need to start with the basics. So walk us through why that's so important when you build a brand from the ground up.
Yeah, I mean, Julie mentioned trust just now, right? And how important that is, how important authenticity is to trust. But actually another very important thing for trust in today's world for retail is very much data. And I'll give you a very, very simplistic example to kind of show why that's kind of relevant. Consider something that happens relatively often using previous generation technologies. So we all know a kind of basic component of a marketing strategy is an abandoned cart. This is not exactly cutting edge stuff we're talking about here, but it works and it drives revenue, and every single brand everywhere does it. That abandoned cart email requires 2 data points. It requires the system to understand that someone's been looking at something, adding it to cart. It also requires that system to understand that an order has not been placed by that person and that, in fact, they did not complete the checkout. We have seen many, many times over the years brands that maybe decide to route their transaction data through a data warehouse. And maybe because they do that, it makes sense because the tech team, the IT team says, okay, we want everything in our data warehouse for good reasons. Maybe that means it doesn't get to the email system, or maybe it does, but it takes a bit of time. Maybe it takes an hour to get to the email system. And they've got a campaign set up and the marketer's doing the best. They're trying to, create a great experience. They're trying to genuinely genuinely remind someone like, hey, Ivan, you left this thing. So they set up a campaign, 30 minutes later, send them an email, remind them. The system is set up correctly. The marketer's done absolutely everything. But because the data has not flowed through the IT setup, the data setup, the system doesn't know the order's taken place. So I have bought that white t-shirt. As far as I'm concerned, that's it. I get an email 30 minutes later saying, hey, you've forgotten to buy the t-shirt. How do I feel? Well, I feel like, oh my God, I forgot to buy it. Or did I buy it? Did they charge me? I'm checking my Amex app. I'm like, hold on, am I going to get double charged here? All trust is gone. Not the brand's fault, not the marketer's fault, the data's fault. And imagine that now, not just for a kind of car campaign. Imagine that when you're using the whole set of data to truly understand each individual customer. Millions of different data points, behavioral data, demographic data, orders, returns, product taxonomy. All of this. Imagine agentic AI. So AI agents utilizing that for thousands of different use cases. Imagine how many examples like the one I just gave you are possible and how wrong you can get it and how much trust you can lose.
How many points of failure?
Exactly. Data is the foundation right now.
Yeah.
It is the only thing that will ensure that these kind of issues don't happen in the future.
What Julie's describing, and this both of you are, this idea of you're building trust maybe for the first time through a brand, through imagery, marketing campaigns. Maybe someone hadn't shopped at Gap for a long time. It's like, wow, that's really interesting and cool. But then what you're describing, Ivan, happens. Yeah. All the points of failure actually fail. Yeah. And all the money that was just spent on that campaign was for nothing.
Undone completely.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Julie, when you think about the role of a marketer now today, or a marketing team, because of, we'll just assume that some of this data that Ivan's describing is accurate, all of this is working, how does the marketing team's job now change?
Marketing is in a state of flux right now, for sure. And I think that the most important thing is for teams to understand how to use and adopt AI more as an accelerant rather than a replacement. How can you, again, start by having complete clarity of the brand identity, making sure that that's really well documented so that not just the people who are on the marketing team, but everybody across the organization understands what the brand represents and how to bring that to life in, every way possible for their consumers, how to brief agency partners, and on and on. So if you have that foundation in place, then you can start to embrace these tools as means to find efficiencies so that the teams can focus more on the high value tasks, the storytelling, the emotional connections. AI can be a thought partner and create ideas and options, but really you still need that human filter to decide what makes the most sense given our broader objectives. So the teams that I work with and am, sort of watching on this journey of embracing, I think a lot of times people's initial reaction is because the media is helping perpetuate this fear factor of what does this mean for my job? But as they're starting to, if they have the right foundations in place, they're starting to realize with these small wins of like, wow, that's actually making my job easier so I can spend time on the things that bring me joy and make me feel like I'm having a positive impact in my role.
Yeah. And maybe that time spent gives them the ability to take a breath and think bigger than beyond the day-to-day execution of email campaigns and SMS messages and all of that work.
Exactly. There's a really important question to be asked, which is not how can I do more with less through AI, but how can I use AI to help solve the pain points of our customers and our team? If you start with that question, I think you start to embrace the technology and its capabilities in a much different way with a far greater impact than if it starts with this sort of like scarcity mentality.
What do you think are some of those pain points? Or Ivan, maybe I'll throw that to you. What are some of those pain points that Julie's describing that customers and maybe the team, what are you seeing?
Especially in this current paradigm of AI, where we're all trying to work out what exactly can it do and what can't it do. We're sort of feeling it out. You push too far, it breaks down. You're like, okay, hold on, I've kind of asked too much of it. Let's sort of take it back. One very successful approach is to work out where is there something repetitive that a smart, probably college-educated human being is currently having to do, because that's probably not where their happy place is. They probably didn't spend 4 years at university to get a degree to then kind of go and press a button, a piece of software over and over. They would be just as happy as the business would be for that to be kind of upgraded and taken away from them. And if we think about just kind of software industry in general, so software industry has been the automation of human workflows. Kind of, if you think about it, accountants used to do accounting on a ledger with a pen, and then at some point they got a calculator, and at some point they got a computer, and at some point they got agents that can do most of the tax return for them. At the end of the day, it's just been the automation of workflows that have already existed before and will exist kind of going forward. Yeah. So actually, as a paradigm, the whole idea of software and now the idea of kind of AI is just an evolution of us taking repetitive stuff and making it hopefully less boring and much more efficient for those human beings. If you approach that from the point of view of, hey, can I replace my humans? That doesn't feel like a world that we want to be building. But exactly as you said, if you approach that from the point of view of, hold on, let's look at how can I improve the customer experience, but also let's look at where am I currently spending lots and lots of cycles of smart humans without really meaningfully moving the needle in the experience. Let's take that away. Let's let AI agent deal with all of it. And let's free up 20, 30, 50, 80% of that individual's time so they can spend it all thinking about how do I create those authentic human touch points in line with my brand identity.
And Julie, have you seen examples of that where it's done really well? Kind of what Ivan's describing?
For me, a lot of that comes back to brands that are delivering more personalized experiences because of their adoption of AI. Yeah. I'll give you a personal anecdote, which is Spotify Discovery Weekly. I am a very big loyalist to this feature of Spotify, and it has bred more trust and brand love for me with Spotify. And essentially, it is a very simple algorithmic capability that every week it gives me a random playlist based on the things that I've said that I like. And I've now learned that I get rewarded the more that I interact with the songs that I like. And it's gotten to the point where legitimately I look forward to every Monday morning getting a new Discovery Weekly playlist.
And so that it's branding for them because
100%.
Like there's an level of expertise and trust, because it sounds like you like what they're recommending.
Yeah,
right?
If it was just to go and listen to songs, I could do that on Apple Music, right? But it's bred this behavior in me that I default to Spotify because I feel like Spotify has taken the time to understand me. And back to the comment I made, they've solved a consumer problem, which is I want to learn and be, able to discover new musicians that fall in line with my musical preferences, but I don't really have the time or the means to go do that discovery on my own. Yeah. And I would say that the algorithm has, really learned me to the point where I probably save 60% of the songs on a weekly basis that I'm served.
Wow, that's a big number.
Yeah.
I experienced something recently, a few days ago, where I was looking for a longer mix that would include a particular song or songs similar to a particular song. So this was kind of, house music, but there's songs that I like, but rather than just kind of allowing Spotify or in my case YouTube Music to just kind of find similar songs, I was like, can you just find me a kind of a 2-hour mixtape of it? And I just asked that question to ChatGPT, and it was remarkable how well it was able to understand a simple 2-3 sentence question, understand what type of music based on the song that I suggested, scan through all of YouTube, and the 5 suggestions it came up with, all 5 excellent. Now, if you apply that to retail, the same thing is true. Basically, every retail brand is now in competition with something like ChatGPT, where I say, okay, for my denim selection, my jeans selection, I care about stretchiness and comfort more than I care about fit. I don't want them to be kind of ridiculously stretchy. We're not looking for kind of jeggings here. I need to be able to wear them in a formal and a casual environment. Go and find me this. And right now, ChatGPT is frankly winning
Yeah.
against what actual brands who sell denim are delivering as a customer experience. Now is the time to catch up, because otherwise that's going to be tough.
And when you think about that from a product perspective, Julie, where if I think back maybe your early Allbirds experience, it was a product-driven company in many ways, because they were doing things that were innovative and sustainable and really interesting and I would say groundbreaking at the time. But that's not enough anymore. And so what you've both been describing is this idea of product is important, but product alone can't build a business.
Correct.
When you think about today, how is that impacting the entire business from a marketing standpoint?
There's another brand example that I would throw out that is an example of how product is not enough. Brand is the key differentiator, and it's really living the values, and that is Dove. Dove last year celebrated its 20th anniversary of its Real Beauty campaign. And as AI has really risen, they faced a decision. It's from an efficiency standpoint, if it was just an efficiency decision, it is far more efficient to generate AI models and, be able to scale content at a rapid pace that way. However, their brand DNA is rooted in this idea of authenticity and inclusivity and celebrating, bodies of all shapes and size. And so it would be incredibly inauthentic if they went out and said that that is their core value set, only to then use AI generated models. And so not only did they take a stand on, as a company, this is what we believe in, then therefore we are making a proclamation that we will not use AI generated models. They could have stopped there, quite frankly, and it would have felt really genuine and probably built them some of that ongoing brand love and trust. But they took it a step further. They actually published an AI prompt playbook. So they took it upon themselves to use their brand as a resource to help educate other creators and brands on, if you are going to create AI generated content and models, how do you approach prompting so that you can be as authentic and make sure that we are representing diversity? And it's a really wonderful playbook, quite frankly. And I think it just sets a tone for soap is soap. What is going to differentiate people believing that this is a brand that stands for a real definition of beauty in an AI-generated world.
Wow. And not many brands have made that, I think, at least public statement that they won't do that.
No, it takes a lot of courage.
It does take a lot of courage, yeah. Because brands are now being called out when they've been recognized as being AI-generated.
Correct.
And it seems like the press on the bad brands, maybe it's it's my own personal newsfeed as a fashion person. Like when it goes wrong, it seems to hit the newsfeed very quickly versus someone that's maybe doing it right and doing the gracious and important thing for the brand. Like Dove doesn't get the news cycle hits.
Yeah. If only that AI prompt playbook had made the social rounds in the way that some of the negative press does. Imagine the world we would be living in,
really
and
true.
how much more, trust and love that brand would be credited with.
Yeah, it's true.
I think we'll definitely see a lot more of that in the future. And I don't mean just simply, like for Dove, it would be so horrendous for them to use an AI model. It would go against everything that they spent all this time
100%.
building up and people really buy into and believe. It was a perfect marketing strategy, an authentic one for them. But for some brands, maybe actually using an AI model would be in line with their values.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think the really important thing, and I think you mentioned this earlier already, is that transparency is going to be absolutely key. In the same way as transparency about your take on sustainability, the kind of the big push of B Corps, for example, has been vital for the last 10 years. We as sort of humanity have really wanted to understand what is this brand's point of view on sustainability. We do not want to be wrecking the planet here. I think this current kind of new age basically heralds the requirement for brands to be very transparent about what exactly they will and will not be doing with AI. And for a while, we've seen that with data. So we've seen that brands that use data well will communicate it not just through things like your privacy policy, which is a legal requirement, but actually through this is why, this is what we do with your data, and this is why we use it. We use it to better your experience, and we're totally okay if you don't want that, but we are not using it for nefarious purposes. We are using it to make sure that you have a great time shopping or interacting with us. With AI, that kind of just goes up a whole other level. And we will definitely see brands starting to publicly talk about what kind of AI they do and don't use and why. And I think that's going to land very well, because nobody wants to find out that someone's been using data and AI to sneakily get them to buy.
Right.
That's not great for anybody involved.
Right.
But personally, I'm totally fine for someone to use data and AI to give me a great experience if it's not done for nefarious purposes. I mean, why not? The world's far too busy, far too hectic.
Yeah.
I don't have time to kind of do all of the complicated things. If my life can be better and easier through data and AI, I would very much like that. Yes, please.
Yes.
So, I look forward to seeing more people, more brands being open as Dove have been about what they're going to do.
Of the brands that you serve with Ometria, is that product conversation been top of mind for them as well?
We certainly see that brands who understand the importance of getting their data fully aligned, like if they have made that decision at board level and they have then decided to implement a CDP, and more than that, they've decided to choose from the market a CDP that understands retail as we do, most importantly, that's built for marketers to actually create those experiences. There are lots of systems on the market that are built to be just a data silo of customer data as opposed to actually kind of create the experiences. If they've gone through that journey, then they've ended up as one of our kind of 200 customers. They're already thinking in the right way. So the conversations are always exciting. It's say, okay, first of all, how do we make sure that data is in fact accurate so we don't make the mistake that I kind of talked about a few minutes ago? But then secondly, now, how do we not only create the experiences, how do we talk to people about how we're leveraging data and AI for those customer experiences? And it's amazing. Everyone is certainly thinking about it. Of course, how that's going to play out, I mean, this is the exciting thing. It's just the beginning, right?
Yes.
We're all going to see in the next couple of years.
And it feels very overwhelming, I think, as a customer, because every brand always have vying for attention. The brand building then kind of takes over every part of your life. It shows up in all of your different social media channels. It shows up in marketing. It shows up everywhere that's not product related. And it feels very big. Like every brand's trying to be big. There's not enough space in the world. So I agree with you, Ivan. I think it'll be interesting to see who wins and who does it really well and who chooses certain people to represent their brand.
Yeah.
It's a big one.
Yeah.
And like that, it's really interesting to walk down Madison Avenue, Fifth Avenue in a city like this and look at all the campaigns, look at what everyone's doing and seeing who's winning. Yeah. Because you see, who's winning is really the bottom line, in the quarterly reports. So we monitor that in relation to their campaigns and really watch and see what's working.
Yeah, I mean, the double bottom line, right? You have to hit both.
You have to hit both.
You have to, of course, you have to hit the numbers. Like at the end of the day, this is these are businesses. They won't exist. They won't survive without it. But the second bottom line is just as important.
So, Julie, I wanted to jump about, in that vein of there's so much competition, there's also this sense of who's copying who and plagiarism. And how do you take things like ChatGPT and not drop it in and try to find inspiration? Because it's the middle of Fashion Week. I have seen several shows. I've seen pictures. There's plagiarism going on here without question. So where does that play into the kind of ecosystem of marketing?
It's fascinating because on the one hand, since the dawn of advertising and marketing, people take cues from culture. And, they say imitation is the best form of flattery. But what has always worked is that these brands are taking inspiration from what's happening out in the world and other brands, but then they are making it their own by applying their own brand DNA and sort of that human quotient. And so it still feels, again, to use the word authentic, because of that, because it truly is inspiration. Where it crosses the line is when that inspiration actually becomes plagiarism and you've lost all uniqueness in the way that you're showing up. All these brands are trying to figure out how do they really educate the large language models on their brands so that they can leverage the benefit of that sort of pattern recognition and all the things we've talked about contribute to the authenticity and the efficiency. The issue, though, is if you are training those LLMs on somebody else's brand, whose value is that? And, it is a really gray area that I think we are just at the very beginning stages of understanding the legalities of it. There was just a recent lawsuit where a bunch of authors, you guys might have heard, won over $1 billion because the LLMs were trained on their proprietary works. And I think it's just like when, some of these other channels and tactics were entered into. I think about when we first started using social media influencers as marketing vehicles. There was a lot of unknown and therefore a lot of exploration around what needs to be disclosed and what doesn't. Is it that you paid them? Or if you give them free product, is that considered payment? And is that a true brand endorsement? And so we're really in early innings of figuring out where that sits. I think ultimately, as a brand person and, brand managers who are living day in and day out trying to protect their brand identity and DNA, it comes down to, are you doing something that is ultimately still about the human quotient of interpreting things and making them your own, taking the inspiration and nothing more.
Yeah. Because we've seen where influencers can damage a brand.
Yeah.
They're human and they have other things going on in their life that become public consumption. Mm-hmm. It's a fascinating time, I agree with you, because the influencer alone, you're right, paid or unpaid, could have been enough, but it feels like it's become a much more important decision.
People are very vocal when they see something that doesn't seem right.
Yes.
And so aside from just sort of the risk from the perspective of your own brand values and ethics, there's also the risk that even if you think it's okay and somebody catches wind of it, you're going to do so much more damage to your brand. Yeah. So much more damage to your brand. And there was I think it was Tech Radar had a recent stat that they shared that one false move and over 70% of people said that they would consider moving away from the brand. So it's real. What it does to trust erosion, and therefore I think err on the side of caution right now.
I actually think that's how it's going to play out. I also think that's how it should play out. I see both sides of the kind of the plagiarism debate. Unilaterally, plagiarism is completely out of the question. But at the end of the day, we humans are almost exactly the same if you abstract it away as an LLM, right? So we take inputs. So here we are kind of talking. So we see stuff, we hear stuff that kind of comes into our system. And then we have our kind of central nervous system that processes all of that and triggers all sorts of chemicals and everything else. And we've got neurons that fire, kind of connecting things together, process it. And then there's an output. So I sort of say something right now that's an output from having heard what we've just talked about and sort of thought about and processed it. It's exactly what the LLM does, like literally kind of identical. The LLM is not yet as complex as our brains. It doesn't have the central nervous system and all the other elements, but let's say 10, 20 years or something, it'll get to the same level of complexity. So at the end of the day, what it does is exactly the same thing as a human is going to do. And everything that we've ever done is just completely influenced by everything that we've seen and heard and experienced. So if I come up with an idea for a brand campaign, is it really unique, or have I just plagiarized the 1,000 brands that have influenced me over time? If I decide to start a business and my favorite brand ever is Nike, and I've read every single book possible, I've read Shoe Dog 75 times, and then it just happens to take a lot of cues from that. Is that plagiarism, or is that me being really inspired? It's just really hard to tell. And so I think the only way that this is going to play out is the humans that form the population of the world will determine whether it is or isn't. Mm-hmm. They will sense, using our human instinct, whether it's authentic or not, and they will just decide. And it will be the wisdom of the crowd and things that are very blatantly a rip-off for commercial purposes with no authenticity and no thought applied, whether it's done by an AI LLM or by a human brand marketer that's a bit lazy, those will not work. Mm-hmm. And the crowd will go and say so on social media everywhere else. But the ones that are actually like, you know what, that's really cool. They have remixed the Nike brand, or they've taken the kind of idea of the Dove campaign, pretty similar, but they've really put their own spin on it. that will be fine.
Yeah.
And I think that is the only way that we'll actually be able to tell. It's just too complicated to get to the bottom of, did an LLM really get trained on this data, and did what it come up with, like, is that plagiarism or is it kind of inspiration?
Yeah.
I think we've gone past the ability for a human being to actually get into the weeds and make that judgment call.
Wow. And that's within a relatively short amount of time.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating to think about that. 5 years, would you say?
Yeah.
Less. Julie, I want to kind of shift a little bit just based on economics that are happening in many industries today. And brands are being asked to do everything that you've both been describing for the last 30 minutes with no budget, basically.
Yes.
And so how is that playing out in the brands you're advising and seeing?
Well, I think it's starting to understand, I said, what questions should you be asking and problems should you be solving? And then identifying tools that really help with that. You got to start small. You can't boil the ocean and try and upend your entire marketing operation from day one. You need to get some of these small wins. And when I say wins, it's twofold. It's winning it from the perspective of the contribution to the business, because at the end of the day, they are in business. But it's also getting people back the valuable time to be able to do other things, both professionally and personally, right? But I think that it really comes down to, you can't do it all. So just pick the few things that you know are going to be the most high impact and start there. And over time, you'll be able to scale more and more and make more of a case for how valuable this investment is in terms of unlocking some of the bigger goals that the company has.
Yeah. And Ivan, of those things Julie's describing, those priorities, are you seeing common things across brands, that they're all picking similar priorities?
There's a bit of commonality. Maybe one thing to pick up on, definitely, that you just mentioned. What we're seeing a lot with brands is there's a huge amount of demand for leveraging the AI technologies at a kind of user practitioner level. There's obviously a lot of fear of jobs being replaced, and that's true. It's a valid fear. Who knows how it's going to play out? Yeah. Hopefully everyone who's got a job now will be able to upskill over time. So I think, for those people who are retail practitioners right now, they should be in a good place. But what we also see is the process of onboarding a significant new vendor is long, is arduous, and has many other stakeholders involved in getting that over the line. From a governance point of view, a risk point of view, just 20 different people who are all involved in making it happen. And so people want to get on with it. The business wants to get on with it. The practitioners want to get on with it. But the processes within a large organization just make it very, very difficult. So one thing that we are seeing is choosing the right vendor who you believe fully understands the new paradigm of AI, fully understands the industry, kind of retail, and fully understands your business and your business needs today, but also your business needs in the future. That has become even more important than it ever has been. Because now, if you have that vendor and you're already working with them, then as soon as there's a new AI use case, you can trust that that vendor will already be on top of it because they know your business, your industry, that's exactly what they do. And you will no longer have to go through a 2-year procurement cycle because you're already working with that vendor. They just unlock that use case for you. We are all learning as we go. So, to answer your question, we're definitely seeing specifics, like, for example, insights and reporting. Every Monday, somebody has to go and create a specific report for a specific trade meeting in a specific format. Let's be honest, that should be done by an AI agent, and it can be. Like, you press a button, that agent's going to sort it out. The technology exists today. Haven't Ometria, haven't other, that's just one example where everybody doesn't want to be doing that, and that absolutely is something that is a use case possible by agentic AI today. But what's going to be the relevant use case in a month or in a couple of months or in a year? We actually don't know. We're all learning as we go. So if that partnership is in place and there's a vendor who you trust to be at the cutting edge that you work closely with, you'll be able to leverage those use cases a year, 2 years quicker than other competitors, other companies that haven't got that relationship in place.
Fascinating. Agreed, Julie?
We're living in interesting times in retail. We all know it. It seems like every year we get past one big hurdle and then there's a new one this year. The theme is tariffs. That's really causing retail marketers in particular to think about their broad customer base and how are they maintaining loyalty with the ones that they have. Because when, the purse strings get tighter, a lot of times the marketing budgets get cut. And so how are you going to build deeper, more meaningful relationships that translate to sales with the customers who already know and love you? And that's another use case that I would say is where, there's a lot of energy being put into how can we do this and unearth the right right insights without needing all of the human capital required to do the research. Let's use the people to help make the decisions about where is our energy best placed given the suite of options. But it's really, really important at this day and age, right at this moment in time in retail, to find ways to keep those customers coming back rather than spending such an exorbitant amount of your budget purely on acquisition, because those costs continue to climb, as we know.
Absolutely. And so much has been written about current economic times creating this kind of trade down or move down to brands. And so Walmart's changing a campaign that goes after maybe a more affluent customer that they didn't have before. So the way the customer is then moving between brands and channels also shifts how their marketing dollars become spent. That part is so interesting to me, to watch this evolution of brands and who they really consider to be their target customer.
Yeah.
And that customer actually is changing.
It is changing. And, we're living in a world where people need to rationalize their purchase decisions, and that comes down to value. But it also comes down to values. Is this a brand that I'm value aligned with? And are they bringing me value in my spending my dollar with them versus the other company?
As we wrap up here, what advice would you offer to brand marketers, CMOs, people that have been in the seats that you've had? What advice would you give them as we wrap up 2025 and think about next year?
Lean into AI would be my first thing. I know that it can feel intimidating and, daunting, and there's so many ways in which it could be used. Where do you start? But you just start. And some of that is in getting teams trained on what makes for a great prompt. There's an art to that. And even when I think about my own, sort of jumping into this world, I think my first ChatGPT prompts were written more like Google searches. And it took me a little while to get comfortable almost, talking to it as if it were a human and letting it learn me, and understanding that you get much more value out of it the more descriptive you are, and the more you try and, state the problems you're trying to solve, and using it as a brainstorming buddy and all the things. And so I feel like it could be such an incredible unlock for teams, as long as they have the foundations in place that we talked about that really codify their authenticity. Then you use it as, a real sandbox for exploration and creativity and ways to propel your business forward. But that comes through adoption and experimentation, and not being intimidated by what it might mean for your job, but really seeing it as an accelerant.
And that fear feels very real. I still hear brands that say they won't let us use it at work, but they're doing it anyway.
Yeah.
And so I do think it's fascinating, of this mindset that you're describing, of either, we're going to lean in and we're going to learn and we're going to test and we're going to try new things, or we're going to put the lockdown on everyone's devices.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
And the other thing, and it kind of dovetails into one of the comments that you made, Ivan, is brands are going to be discovered more and more through LLMs. The way in which this is shaking up traditional search. We talk about that with a lot of the brands that I'm working with, and the power of reviews and other resources. Reddit is a source of information. All of these other channels become so increasingly important. And, I think that we are very quickly getting to the place where brand discovery is going to be led through those types of platforms, more so than we've seen with Google. And every brand is having to adjust accordingly. Yeah. But it is having a fundamental shift on marketing investment strategy. And so that's the other thing I would encourage brands to be thinking about, is how are you adapting your site copy and landing page strategy and all of these things that aid the discovery process, because people are going to be starting with a simple search about, if I'm looking for a pair of denim that has this kind of stretch and this kind of wash, that's how we're going to start discovering and ultimately purchasing.
Right. Without serving you an ad after
Exactly.
the search, which is fascinating to watch. Thank you. Ivan, what's your advice today?
First of all, don't panic. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Stay human and stay authentic, I think, really, to summarize the conversation that we've just had.
Yeah.
You're going to have a lot more time now to be able to add the soul into the campaigns. The operation of the campaign will be done by AI. All of the things that you're spending a lot of time on now, that will all become very easy. And you will have your AI agents doing it for you. And they'll keep you in the loop, and they'll keep you updated. They're not just going to run off and do crazy stuff, especially if the data is all correct, as we talked about. But that means that you have all of this time to make sure that you put that human touch, that authenticity, and quite literally the soul into the campaigns that you do. And that'll be the differentiator.
Well, it's interesting that you described that then, because in this idea of what does a career in marketing look like, it's actually the most creative people, the most human people that have the most creative sensibilities will be those that are the most successful.
Absolutely.
Feels like, I mean, we're across the street from FIT, where I've done a couple of recent guest lectures, and that's top of mind. Like, what does a career in marketing look like? Yeah. It's actually your most creative version of yourself are the winners to be that person.
Yeah. I'm here for it. I've been a brand lover and builder my entire career. Yeah. And we had recently experienced a decade where the pendulum swung to a place of performance marketing and the data sort of driving the decision making in a way that, it needs to be balanced. It needs to be head and heart. But to your point, I think now the distinguishing factor is that unique story and that human quotient and the emotional connection. And that is an art. Yeah. And so we're getting back to the art. And I think that that's a really wonderful thing.
I do too. Thank you. Julie, where can people find you?
Well, I think probably the best place to find me is on LinkedIn.
Great.
I am spending most of my time these days doing fractional CMO work as well as some advisory and board work, focusing on brands that are very purpose-led and helping them through periods of transformational growth and scaling teams. And I have a personal passion around retail and women's sports and health and well-being. So those are the types of brands that I've been putting most of my energy towards today.
Amazing. Thank you. We'll put that link in the show notes. Ivan, how can people find Ometria?
I'm in Ometria.com, definitely, but we're big fans of the human touch, so we'd love to meet you. Come and find us at any of the conferences across the world. We run our own conference, Life Cycle, specifically for retail marketers. London, New York, 400 marketers come, share, spend a whole day kind of collating experiences, sharing experiences, coming out with things that they've learned. Great opportunity to come and meet us, meet the team. But otherwise, come to Ometria.com, drop us a line, and let's catch up. We'll come to you. We want to learn about your challenges and tell you how you can solve many of them using AI.
Amazing. Thank you both. This was really interesting.
Thank you.
Thanks
It was
so
a lot of fun.
much, Ron.
It was great.
So
Thank
great
you.
to have this chat with you, Ivan.
Thank you. That's a wrap on this episode of Retail Intelligence in Action. These insights remind us that trust and authenticity are not just marketing buzzwords. They're the foundation of long-term brand success, especially in an AI-driven world. Huge thanks to Julie Channing for bringing such clarity and integrity to this conversation, and to Ivan and the entire team at Ometria for pushing the boundaries of what's possible in intelligent marketing. Special thanks to Paula Makaji and the exceptional team at OFFBounds. Your creative vision made this series not just possible, but powerful. I'm Ron Thurston. Follow and subscribe to catch every conversation on what it really takes to lead in this new era of AI-powered retail. See you soon.